Hey everyone, welcome to Drifting on Purpose, where we explore the ebb and flow of the uncertainties of life and how to authentically navigate them. We are your hosts. I'm Azriel.
And I'm Addie. Our mission is to cultivate a community of deep thinkers looking to take the path less traveled to uncover their true selves.
Topics range from authenticity, overcoming challenges, finding your purpose, and so much more.
We can't wait to share our conversations, our community, and our stories with you. So be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along. Thanks for being here.
On today's episode, we're so honored and so thrilled to welcome to the show today a very special guest named Tom Morris. Tom is one of the world's top public philosophers and is also a pioneering business thinker. He has a joint PhD from Yale in religious studies and philosophy. And he was one of the most popular teachers in Notre Dame's history, where he taught for over 15 years. He's the author of over 30 books, including True Success, Plato's Lemonade Stand, The Art of Achievement, If Aristotle Ran General Motors, and The Oasis Within. And in 1999, he wrote the book Philosophy For Dummies, and just recently, just this past year, came out with Stoic For Dummies that was co-authored with Gregory Basham. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
This is great. We're going to have fun. I know we will have lots of fun.
Oh, we will have lots of fun. And I just have to tell the audience, we just recorded 40 minutes of the best content you would wish you could have ever heard. However, I didn't hit record. And so embarrassed. And Tom has been gracious enough to just say, let's just do it again. Let's use this. And it's just so much grace. And I just appreciate you so much.
Well, I think this is not new in the history of philosophy. I think Plato went away from a day with Socrates and said, geez, I forgot to hit the record button. I'll just have to make up some stuff. And so we get the dialogues of Plato.
Yes, let's go. And we had the best conversation. And I just obviously just go to your book, Plato's Lemonade Stand, and thinking about how do we create something sweet out of something bitter.
Well, one thing is that when we did the previous 45 minutes and we had such fun, I wish you guys had been here with us. We had such fun, but we started off not knowing each other very well at all. And now we feel like we're old buddies. And so the conversation is going to be even better now than it was the first 45 minutes. And you're going to be glad we rehearsed because you're going to say, these guys are so good now. They can't just be doing this for the first time. No, we're not.
No, we're not. No, not at all.
Take two.
One thing I really did enjoy, honestly, of the last conversation we had, if you don't mind again, kind of telling us this story about how you became a public philosopher, how you decided to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind reiterating?
No, I don't mind at all.
So amazing. Thank you so much.
So I grew up, we moved into this little 800 square foot rented house on a dirt street that eventually was paved outside Durham, North Carolina, which then became part of Durham, North Carolina. And I grew up not knowing I was poor. I grew up, with kind of one or two pairs of pants and eating 2 meals a day and living what seemed to be a really happy life. And it was time for applying for college in high school. And my mother said, well, there's no money for college, so you should figure out what kind of job you want to do. And my relatives were truck drivers and farmers and mechanics. And my dad at that point had just started a real estate company. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I want to do. And all of a sudden my high school nominated me for a scholarship. And it was called a Moorhead Scholarship, now called a Moorhead Cane. And we had to call around to find out, well, wait a minute, what is this? Because we didn't know the university world at all. Well, it was free everything. I mean, tuition, room, books, food, spending money. So I actually graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, with money left over from my scholarship. It was like unbelievable. And then because I was a Moorhead scholar, I got into Yale for free, and I didn't have to pay anything for 6 years of 2 masters and 2 PhDs. It was like, that was my budget, for free. So it was done. And then my dad said, if you don't get the kind of job you want, you can come work with me in my real estate company. So while I was writing my dissertation, I was getting my North Carolina real estate broker's license, writing my second book. I'd written my first one in college, and having my first child. It was quite a year. And then I got hired by the place in the world that wanted to be number one in the world in my specialty, which at the time was philosophy of religion. Notre Dame wanted to be number one in the world. I get hired by them. It was like, you can't beat this. And so I had 15 years of the most amazing experience with teaching an eighth of the student body in many of the years at Notre Dame. And we do crazy things, like I'd have a robot give part of the lecture on artificial intelligence, telling every crazy electricity joke that you could possibly think of that was just so bad it was funny. And then nobody would sit in the first two rows, so I had Burger King cater the first two rows. We did a course on miracles, and I set it up so that I wanted a Domino's pizza, but you don't get everything you want in this world, because it was 9 o'clock in the morning and Domino's wasn't even open until 10. And so, but miraculously, there a pizza gets delivered, in response to my prayer for a pizza. And the Domino's guy comes in and he gives a pizza. And I at the time, if it was over 30 minutes, you got it free or something, And so I said, boy, I wish I could get it for free. And he said, the Domino's guy said, well, it's been over 30 minutes. You do get it free. And then he gives me this pizza in front of 400 freshmen. And they're all like, and I'd said, you guys, I hate to eat this pizza in front of you. You don't have a pizza to eat. I wish everybody in this class got a pizza. And all eyes go to the door. And I said, well, you don't always get what you want in this class. We would do stuff like that. Bring the marching band in to play the victory march before an exam, and the students would jump on their chairs and they would yell and scream. And so I left that. I decided to resign and be a public philosopher. And people said, well, but you're having fun. It's like the most popular class ever. And whenever Notre Dame was asked to do something, I would be the guy they would ask, oh, you go speak to NBC Sports. Oh, you be the guy on the Discovery Channel. Or you be the guy who does this and the other. The football team would come to my kids' birthday parties. I mean, it was like, but I felt a sense of calling, a sense of mission, a dawning sense of purpose. There hadn't been a public philosopher since Ralph Waldo Emerson in the 19th century. We needed a public philosopher. We needed to have a system so you didn't have to go to a university for a year to learn some philosophy, that there was a philosopher who would come to where you live. And so I decided to try that with no guarantees at all that it would work for 6 months. But businesses had been asking me to give talks. Can you talk? Did the philosopher say anything about ethics? Did the philosopher say anything about success? Did the philosopher say? Every time they would ask, I said, well, let me look into that. Okay, yeah, sure. Let me look into that. I learned to say yes to interesting challenges, and it generated a career I could never have even imagined. I've given talks in a jungle. I've given talks on a jet. I've given talks in the craziest settings you could possibly imagine, on a cruise ship that later sank into the Baltic Sea. I've given talks with the former head of the KGB, who was the only evil guy I have ever met in my life. I've had 10,000 people in front of me in a room. I've seen 5,000 people get so excited about philosophy. It looked like we were at a rock concert. As soon as I finished my talk, it was like a standing ovation that would never end, with people stomping their feet and screaming and whistling. And because I was willing to say yes to trying something new. Crazy.
I love it. And you mentioned something in our previous talk about not having to be the best, right? You just have to be open, and you have to be the only. And what I was saying before is that felt like a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders, because I feel like a lot of people do let fear kind of get in the way of them propelling forward in one direction or another. And so just being open to life, being open to curiosity, and having that adventure and that just zest for trying new things. It feels so attainable.
Yeah, it is. And fear is rarely a good motivator. I don't say never, because there are certain dangerous circumstances in which fear is appropriate and can motivate you to get out of the way of the danger very quickly. So, but it's not a good general life motivator. In politics, in personal life, in any profession, it's not fear, but it's love that drives people to be their best and do their best. And again, the point you made, Addie, in our previous 45 minutes, which we used as our warm-up, we were talking about the people trying to be the best, be the best. You got to be the best. No, a better piece of business advice has been, don't try to be the best, try to be the only. Try to be so distinctive, so different, so uniquely you, that you don't really have any direct competition. I mean, when I was out there in public as a philosopher, the Washington Speakers Bureau would pair me up with General Schwarzkopf, with Colin Powell, with George H.W. and Barbara Bush, with all the astronauts, all the blue angels, the Thunderbirds, whoever had just been to the moon or whatever. And it was like, I was the who's he amongst the who's who. I was the only person on the program I'd never heard of, but all of a sudden I was being shot out of a cannon because people thought, wait, philosophy? Like what is this? And I would do my thing with passion and love and high energy and funny stories, and people would just go nuts. My old agent at the Washington Speakers Bureau just told me one company hired me 50 times in a 2-year period,
Wow.
each time paying me more than my Notre Dame starting salary for a year.
Wow.
And so I gave up 20 years of guaranteed income. My friends were quick to point out, you're going to give up 20 years of guaranteed income. But there was 1 year that I got all that back plus. And so I would tell other young philosophers wanting to do what I do, impact first, income second. Never be concerned about the income first and foremost. Be concerned about your positive impact in the world. And if you're doing that right, the income will follow. People so fixated on money, power, fame, status. In the ancient world, Socrates said, that stuff is going to be a curse, not a blessing, unless you first work on the inner side of your soul. Don't chase outer things before establishing an inner foundation in your own soul. So philosophy is all about that. Some of the ancients said philosophy is therapy. Philosophy is therapy for the soul. Philosophy is medicine for the soul, done right. And that's what I found out. I've spoken to every industry you can imagine. I mean, in the automobile industry, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, their top executives would bring me in, their dealers would bring me in. And who would think that car companies would want to hear about philosophy? But when we do it right, everybody wants to hear about philosophy.
So
Yeah.
why now do you feel like Stoicism then is having such like a fan base? Because Stoicism is hard. If you're a practicing Stoic, you're like, let's bring everything on, whether good or bad. So why is it being such like so welcomed right now?
Well, there are a couple things. One thing is like, Andy, I know you're a tennis player. So if you want to be a really good tennis player, like when I was in college, I practiced 5 hours a day on a tennis court. I would skip classes to practice my serve by myself. I'd skip classes to hit the back wall. And I would do 5 hours of ground strokes with somebody on the women's tennis team who was really good at that. I would just go out and do 5 hours, and it was exhausting. But I didn't do that until I was motivated. And what got me motivated wasn't being thrown in the deep end right away. It was watching great tennis matches on TV. And I was like, wow, that's really good. I wish I could do that. So sometimes when people start reading the Stoics, like they read Marcus Aurelius or they read Epictetus or they read Seneca, it's like, wow, I wish I could do that. So it's not like they're having to be trained as a wrestler from day one. They first of all get intrigued, and people hear that Stoicism will really help you calm down. It'll help you deal with adversity. It'll help you live a happier life. And I've seen people come to Stoicism for 2 reasons. Some come to cope. I've got all this tough stuff in my life. I need to learn how to cope with it. And some people come to conquer. The business startup people who want to just conquer the world. Well, the Stoics can help with both things, to cope and to conquer. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized to do either of those things, you have to do the other as well. You never really learn to cope unless you learn to conquer certain things, keeping you from coping. You never really learn to conquer unless you learn to cope with the more difficult things you encounter along the way. The Stoics are good at both. In fact, Epictetus's most famous book, the Handbook, the Manual, starts off with a sentence. There's some things we can control, and there's some things we can't control. And it's like, wait a minute. You're not going to get a Nobel Prize for that, Epictetus. It's like, that's pretty obvious, right? Some things there's some things up to us, some things not up to us, some things we can control, other things we can't control. Okay. But it's not just the insight itself, it's what you do with it. Carry that insight with you into every situation, and you'll say, okay, there's a lot of stuff I'm worrying about that I can't control. What is my worry contributing? to making the situation better? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so why am I wasting my time on it? Okay, I'm not. I'm going to focus on what I can control. And some people in the modern world have said, okay, the Stoics have this dichotomy: things you can control, things you can't control. The things you can totally control tend to be inner things, and not all those, but some of those. Well, maybe there's not just a stark dichotomy. Maybe it's more like a spectrum. Maybe it's less like an old on-off light switch and more like a dimmer switch. So maybe there's this whole spectrum of control. At one end of the things you can't control at all, and the other end is things you totally can control. Well, so gravitate toward one end of the spectrum with your time and your attention and your focus and your efforts, or you're just going to be unnecessarily frustrated. In fact, most people in our world focus on the wrong things, the things they have no control over. Oh my goodness, politics, oh my goodness, the economy. I start the book Stoicism for Dummies with the claim that half of wisdom consists in learning what to embrace and what to release. And I make the claim that most people seem to go around embracing what they should release and releasing what they should embrace. And that's why they're so unhappy. If we can get that right, if we can figure that out, what's worth holding on to and what should we really just let go? And as we were saying earlier, before we were recording what we were saying, embrace and release, that's a skilled behavior, just like a backhand or a forehand in tennis, just like a serve in tennis. The first time you try one of those things, you're not going to be real good at it. But the more you try, the better you get. And so I counsel people all the time, be willing to try to release something, even if you don't really do it very well at first. Stumble a little bit until you learn how to walk, and then you can jog, and then you can run. If you really try to practice the embrace and release, then you will get better. And a year from now, you'll say to me, wow, I'm so much better at that. Once you told me to be willing to stumble and fall, to be willing to be imperfect on my road to getting better. We have these unrealistic expectations that if we're not perfect at something right away, we're not even going to try it at all. And Aristotle said you learn by doing. So be willing to take your lumps. As Emerson said, all life is experiment, and no experiment fails if you learn from it. And that's a deep philosophical insight.
And it brings to mind the obstacle is the way. They're gonna make challenges and expect it, own it, love it. How do you learn to love these challenges?
I know. You have to be creative. It's almost like, okay, so when the pandemic happened and when the shutdown happened in March of 2020, all public events where people like me speak at, they were all canceled.
Right.
And so people started calling me in March saying, you got to come and talk to her. I just had the book Plato's Lemonade Stand come out. When life hands you lemons, make lemonade. How do you do it? Well, there you go. 200 or 300 pages on how to do it. Nobody had ever written about that. And it came out in January of 2020. People said, what are you, this genius? You knew that we were going to be dealing with the greatest lemons of life ever. I said, no, it just took me 15 years to get the book finished. I rewrote it 24 times. It had 6 titles. Finally, it's ready, and boom, a pandemic. Okay. So I don't have to go on book tour. That's good. But people would call me from the banking industry, from other industries. Could you speak to our executive team on disruptive change? But the problem is we don't have a budget for virtual talks. That's fine. I'll do it pro bono. I'll do it for free. So March, April, and May of 2020, I was given 3 or 4 free talks a week on dealing with disruptive change, while all the other public speakers I knew were sitting at home waiting for the meetings to be rescheduled. I was becoming a really good Zoom speaker by doing it. As Aristotle said, you learn by doing. The obstacle had become the way. The obstacle to me going out and speaking in person had become the way for me to learn how to speak over Zoom and all the other virtual platforms. And literally, none of the other speakers that I knew were getting good at it because they weren't even trying it. I was doing it for free week after week after week until somebody said, oh, we've got a budget. Okay. I didn't get into this for the budgets. I got into this to make a difference for people. I did it for my first 2 years of speaking in South Bend, Indiana for businesses. I did it all for free. I didn't know people paid speakers. And wasn't my motivation. My motivation was to make a difference, right? So here I go. The obstacle is nobody can go anyplace. Okay, that's going to become a way for me to master a new medium. And it's been great ever since. So that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up.
Amazing. The way you speak, Tom, and the excitement, enthusiasm with which you speak about philosophy is just, I can feel you. It's virtual, but I can feel you. And I hope and I believe our listener will be able to hear that too. Are there things in your life that you do to help you stay in this zone of genius or this zone of excitement? Like, how do you cultivate this energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my father used to say, do something as long as you love it and you think you should have something distinctive to contribute. If either of those things changes, you should make a change. And his life
Hmm.
exemplified that. And his also best advice to me as a kid was life is supposed to be a series of adventures. The ones you've already been on have prepared you for the ones that are upcoming, and often in ways you can't even imagine. So trust the process. When people get frustrated with the process, that erodes their passion, that erodes their love.
Mhm.
When you embrace the process, wherever it's seeming to take you, you don't have that resistance in your life of, oh, this is terrible. Oh, I can't stand this. I don't like doing it this way. How is it? How is it possible to be excited and enthusiastic and passionate about something if you're dealing with resentment and bitterness and irritation and frustration? And so I find a way to embrace whatever's going on in
Mhm.
as good a way as I can. I'm not perfect at that, but I'm doing what I love. And
Hmm.
if it ever stopped, you wouldn't see me still doing it, but not loving it. I'd be following my dad's advice and doing something else that I did love. And so you'd say, oh, Tom Morris is always excited about whatever he's doing. You wouldn't say, well, here's Tom Morris. He used to be excited about philosophy, but now he's just going through the motions. Nope, that wouldn't be me. And I don't think that should be anybody.
Right.
I think we should learn to follow our hearts. And the way you can be the best you, the
Hmm.
way you could be not the best, but the only, is to have that singular passion about whatever form of service, whatever purpose you're following right now. Just let it fully imbue your spirit, embody it to the max, because there is no good substitute for that in the world of engaging people with whatever you're doing.
I love that so much. And I agree. You have such a captivating energy, and you can just, I mean, the 40 minutes prior to this and our conversations now have just, they've put a pep in my step. And
Good.
I do feel like there's this little zest of opening up my world and exploring and feeling confident and happy about that rather than nervous and
Yeah.
hesitant. So thank
Well,
you.
I never want to be one of these obnoxious, over the top people. You know what I'm talking about. There are some people who are just
Mhm.
kind of ridiculously enthusiastic about everything. And it's like, oh my goodness, but I had a friend in college who loved to eat, and so did I. But my friend used to say, and no matter how big the meal was, no matter how much he was eating, he would say, one bite short of gluttony. He would say, I'm going to stop one bite short of gluttony. And that's the same thing with your
Mhm.
zest, your energy, your enthusiasm. You never want to be over the top with this, right? But you want to be genuine about it. You want to be authentic about it. And that's an attractive force.
Hmm.
Whereas people who go way too far, that ends up being the opposite kind of force. It pushes people apart rather than bringing people together. So I'm just glad that you guys, after a 45-minute unrecorded version of what we're doing now, you guys aren't saying, well, to yourselves, I'm totally sick of this guy by now. But if rather than that, we're enjoying each other, I think, at an even deeper level.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I think, as you said, when you follow your passions and you follow what you're excited about, that authenticity comes off so naturally. So it doesn't feel gimmicky. It doesn't feel
Right,
forced.
right.
It's just that natural ebb and flow, and I can definitely feel it.
Yeah, that's really good. There are some speakers who manufacture a positivity on stage
Mhm.
that backstage they are the opposite. And I wouldn't want the burden of having to keep up a false face every time I engaged with people and knew they were looking.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You try, be authentic, be genuine. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. You're not carrying a burden that you're a false face that your word's going to slip at any moment, right? So
Yeah.
I think my students would always talk about the positive energy and how much fun we had and all that. And as a side effect, they learned a lot of philosophy because they loved being there.
I think I heard one of your YouTubes, like one of your wisdom nuggets about authenticity, and that's what we're all about. We're here being authentic, and it being compared to harmony.
Yeah.
And I really feel that from you. I feel
Good,
that
good.
you're in harmony, and it shows in like a true confidence type of way. And
Yeah.
you're an exemplar, and
Well,
just so
thanks.
incredible just to have you and just to be here. For listeners that just don't really know much about philosophy, or they're
Yeah.
kind of like, how will this help me? Like, why is
Yeah.
this, why are we even talking about this? Is there
Yeah.
some things that maybe they can think about or start
Yeah.
in a direction?
Oh, yeah. And a good place to start is the word itself, philosophy, philosophia, philo, love of, sophia, wisdom. I like to say this, an object of love is an interesting thing. When you lack it, you pursue it. When you have it, you embrace it.
Mhm.
Philosophy is just about the pursuit and embracing of wisdom, insight for living. In fact, I've often, so a college student from Madrid, Spain, came to Wilmington, North Carolina, where I live, and he wanted to go out to breakfast with me. So we went to this little breakfast place nearby. He wanted to ask me some questions. And so we had just sat in the chairs that very second. And rather than saying, like, what's good on the menu here, or what should I order, or so, he says, what is wisdom? Dr. Morris, what is wisdom? Right, right off the bat. And so I said, the answer I often give people, I said, well, it's embodied insight for living. It's not just insight for living in the form of aphorisms or slogans or clever statements. You could be like a parrot and memorize and be able to say all kinds of clever, wise things, but that doesn't make you wise. It's embodied insight for living. He
Mhm.
said, okay, that makes sense. And then I had an idea I'd never had before. And that's why conversation about this kind of stuff is so important. I said, maybe there's a part of wisdom that is both guidance and guardrails. And he was not a native English speaker. He says, what are guardrails? And I said, well, you're up in the mountains driving along a twisty mountain road and there's a metal railing to keep your car from going over the side. Oh, okay, guardrails. I get it. I said, wisdom is guidance. It shows us the way forward, and it's guardrails to keep us safe as we're going there, to
Mm,
keep your car from going off the side. And most wisdom literature of the last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years has been about the guidance. Do this, do that, follow this, have that. Very little has been about the guardrails, but they are just as important. And so when I present ancient wisdom for modern life, I'm always trying to talk about both, because both the guidance and the guardrails will help you become a different person. And that's what wisdom ultimately is. You're embodying of discernment. So even if you're up against a situation that you've never heard anybody talk about, you've never read a wise person give advice about this situation, it's altogether new, you will have a sort of habit of discernment that will position you well to deal with the situation wisely.
mm.
So
It's
that's
like,
what philosophy is at its best. It's guidance. It's like an inner GPS
Mhm.
to help us get where we need to go without being distracted along the way.
Mhm.
let's go.
Yeah.
Because without that, people get lost, and we see lost people around us all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Do you
true.
think vulnerability plays a part in that journey?
Yeah, I ended a book, If Aristotle Ran General Motors, uh, with a claim that the two keys to leadership greatness, I had come to think, are nobility and humility
Mhm.
together, balanced in a person's life. Nobility, a sense of greatness, a sense of purpose, a sense of uh, 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 something being so important that you're engaged in, and so are the people around you. Everybody in your life, your adventure is important. There's a nobility by that. And then there's a humility. You don't think you know it all. You're open to everybody else's input. You're open to everybody else's insights and their wisdom. Too many people have just the nobility without the humility. Well, that becomes arrogance,
Mhm.
presumptuousness. And some people have the humility without the nobility, and that becomes like, well, who am I to do anything? It becomes kind of an impotence. You're afraid to even try something. It's those two things together. And without the vulnerability element, the nobility comes across as arrogance or presumptuousness, or the humility doesn't even have a chance. But or you're not showing your true humility. There's some people who think they can't show any vulnerability because they have to show strength, as if those are opposite things. But a deeper understanding of both vulnerability and strength realize that they're often intimately entwined, so that if you are an authentic person, again, that theme, you are vulnerable because nobody has every strength. Nobody has every insight. We all have our weaknesses. We all have our imperfections. And if we'll own up to that, then people can engage with us in our entirety rather than just engaging with a facade, which is what too many people give you, a veneer, a facade of themselves. You're not engaged with the whole person. And so that cuts off a lot of possibilities for wonderful growth on everybody's part. I think vulnerability is really key to people being real together.
I love that.
Yay. Tom Morris, thank you. Thank you for your grace, for your excitement, for just jumping right back in after me totally blundering and making this so fun, and just bringing such life to this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And if you're ever in Pittsburgh and you want to play tennis,
Yeah.
let me know.
Yay.
And just for the people at home, how can they get in touch with you? How can they find out more?
Oh, I'd encourage people, invite people to come to tomvmorris.com. V as in Victor, my middle name, tomvmorris.com. The About page, they can join my blog. They can click on social media, follow me on social media. I'll follow you back. Every morning, I post little paragraphs or sentences to get people's thoughts started for the day about something interesting. People will post back comments, and we get these great conversations going. I would learn to, I've learned now that I actually benefit from every interaction I have with followers on social media, even the occasional troll I can learn something from. But none of your listeners are going to be like that. I would invite them to come and look at my books page, look at my novels page, grab a book, read it, and then email me. My email is in the back of almost every book because it's all a conversation. I've got a lot to learn from your listeners, just like I've learned a lot from you both today, and I thank you so much.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we're so appreciative, and I know our fans and our listeners are going to be so appreciative, and thank you for dropping so many nuggets of wisdom on us today.
You're
I
welcome.
do feel like there's a new pep in my step, and I'm ready to go. So thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Me too.
Thanks for catching us on another episode of Drifting on Purpose. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment so we can continue to cultivate a community of deep thinkers. We'll see you next week.